my husband's childhood sweetheart fell into the water. To punish me, he personally tied me to the river surface. Continuous heavy rain caused the water level to rise, and I was drowned alive. It wasn't until my face was eaten beyond recognition by fish and my body floated to the surface that he coldly asked, "Madam, do you admit your mistake?" The floodwaters were about to submerge my head. Facing the listening device, I desperately shouted Ethan's name. "Help, Ethan." My pleas for help were ignored, and what I received was the sound of a man and woman entangled in a kiss. Then, Ethan's childhood sweetheart, Vivian, lazily spoke, her voice extremely hoarse. "Ethan, it seems like something's happening with Sister Mia." From the listening device came Ethan's emotionless voice, even carrying a hint of disdain and mockery. "Vivian, you're too kind, she's just deliberately playing the victim." Since Vivian fell into the water, Ethan had only suspicion and disgust left for me. To vent for Vivian, he tied me to the river surface for 3 days and 3 nights. He clearly knew that I was most afraid of water. Ignoring the sourness in my chest, the water covering my head filled me with extreme panic, and I desperately struggled to survive. Perhaps my movements were too loud. After a while, I actually heard Ethan ask me, "Do you admit your mistake?" Although Vivian's fall into the water had nothing to do with me, at this moment, to survive, I could only take the blame. As soon as I opened my mouth, water poured in, leaving only gurgling sounds. "Still have the energy to drink water, she won't die anytime soon," Ethan said indifferently, and I could even hear his light laughter. A large amount of water poured into my mouth, making breathing difficult. I still struggled continuously and finally managed to untie the rope binding my hands. As I desperately swam upward, my feet were firmly locked by an iron chain. No matter how I struggled, I couldn't escape, and a sense of suffocation came over me. "Ethan, I'm scared." As my consciousness blurred, Vivian's sobbing sounded in my ear. The next second, Ethan cut off the listening device without any hesitation. What he cut off was not just the listening device, but also my only chance to survive. Even though I was already in a desperate situation, I still refused to give up. Struggling continuously, the iron chain rubbed until it drew blood. The fish in the river smelled the blood and swam toward me. They bit at my wounds. My nerves had collapsed at this moment, and I roared, "Save me, Ethan. I'm pregnant, Ethan." Another large mouthful of water poured into my mouth. Responding to me was only the cold river water and the torrential rain. In those long 10 minutes, my face turned purple, my body pale, and I had no strength left. After being drowned alive, due to my heavy resentment, I couldn't leave the world. Therefore, I came to the side of the culprits, Ethan and Vivian. Abroad, in a villa, the lights were a soft warm tone. Compared to the chill in the water, it seemed incredibly cozy. My body couldn't help but tremble, the bone-chilling sensation before death was still fresh in my memory. Ethan held Vivian as they slept on a large bed. He gently coaxed Vivian with tender eyes until she fell asleep. Pitifully, my body was still tied to the river surface, battered by rain and wind, while Ethan comfortably held his new love. I reached out and viciously pinched his neck. Unfortunately, I was a soul. Invisible and intangible. Ethan carefully put down Vivian in his arms and tiptoed out. I don't know what he was thinking. After pondering for a while, he actually picked up the listening device. "Mia, speak." This was the first time Ethan had ever taken the initiative to contact me. Unfortunately, I was dead. Obviously, he was getting impatient. "Mia, don't play dead, my patience is limited." Ethan furrowed his brows, his fingers nervously curling up. I rolled my eyes at Ethan's face. He abused me in life and continued to threaten me after death. Entrusting my wholehearted love to you, Ethan, was the most wrong decision I ever made. Seeing no response from the listening device for a long time, Ethan's face grew increasingly ugly. "Mia, it seems you haven't learned your lesson. This punishment is still too light for you." After saying that, he stepped forward and connected the listening device to the TV. His expression was complex, and even his fingers couldn't help but tremble. Was this excitement from wanting to appreciate my struggling appearance due to fear? What a pity, I was dead. But I was curious, what expression would Ethan have when he saw my body on the TV? Watching my own death with my husband made my heart feel somewhat desolate. I painfully closed my eyes. After all, those scenes would make me relive the pain again. Ethan turned on the TV, and I turned my head to observe his expression. Expressionless, no fluctuations, even a bit impatient. I thought Ethan would be calm, but I didn't expect him to be this calm. It turns out that in his heart, I was so insignificant. Black screen, how could it be a black screen? Ethan's tone carried some anxiety, and I curiously looked at the TV. It seemed the listening device was damaged by water and went black. Ethan seemed possessed, inexplicably picking up the listening device and shouting my name. Mia, speak. Mia, I'm telling you to answer me, do you hear? Don't make me angry, you know the consequences. Ethan panicked, slumping to the ground, talking to me over and over. When I was calling for help, choking on water, how I wished he could be like this now. How I wished he could notice something wrong. How I wished he could come save me, save my unborn child. But what was he doing then? He was holding Vivian and sleeping. A surge of anger rose in my heart, and in rage, I slapped Ethan's face. He touched his face, somewhat dazed, and hurriedly pulled out his phone from his pocket. Ethan, why didn't you close the window? It's windy. Vivian, with sleepy eyes, walked over and closed the window. Glancing at Ethan's phone, she softly advised, Ethan, about Sister Mia pushing me into the water, I've actually forgiven her. Don't make a fuss for me anymore, take the initiative to make peace with Sister Mia, okay? The originally lit phone was instantly thrown to the ground by Ethan. Make peace? She made a mistake and I have to make peace? This time she dared to push you into the water, next time, will she dare to kill you? Vivian stroked Ethan's chest, helping him calm down. It was really laughable, what was he angry about? I was the one who should be the angriest. I was inexplicably framed by Vivian, who claimed in front of everyone that I pushed her into the water. After Ethan found out, he didn't even listen to my explanation. He had people drag me to the river surface and tie me up, letting the river water submerge most of my body. Once, to save him, I almost drowned in the water. From then on, I became afraid of water. He clearly knew everything, but to vent for Vivian, he still tied me to the river surface. At that time, I cried and begged him to let me go. I explained over and over that it had nothing to do with me, even telling him I was pregnant. But what I got was Ethan's eyes full of disgust. Incorrigible, full of lies. When you admit your mistake, that's when I'll let you out. Just like that, he threw me into the water I feared most. And after Ethan learned that Vivian was fine, he took her abroad to relax. Looking at the affectionate pair in front of me, I felt I was really foolish before. I actually acted as a simp for Ethan for 3 years, single-mindedly wanting to marry him. The sudden phone ring interrupted my thoughts. Vivian picked up Ethan's phone and answered it for him. On the other end, the Shin family's butler was somewhat anxious. Miss Vivian, can you give the phone to the young master? It has been raining heavily for several days, and Madam is still soaking in the river. Vivian deliberately covered the receiver and took it upon herself to reply to the butler. I'm really fine, I was just pushed into the water. I'm better now, let Sister Mia go. Ethan was already angry, and hearing Vivian say this, he was simply furious. He snatched the phone and coldly vented his anger at the butler. If Mia isn't dead, keep her tied up properly, no one is allowed to see her. Even if she dies, it's retribution for her evil deeds. Hearing Ethan say this, the butler was afraid but still replied, Young master, nearby villagers say they saw a female corpse in the river. The air seemed to freeze in that instant. Vivian fearfully glanced at Ethan. Ethan, who was originally angry, couldn't help but laugh upon hearing the butler say this. He didn't believe it at all, thinking it was another scheme by me to deceive him. When Vivian returned to the country and Ethan stayed out all night, I chose to let go and left. At that time, Ethan searched for me for 3 days and 3 nights, without sleep. He drove recklessly alone at night, almost getting into an accident. When he returned, he found me at home. At that time, his eyes were bloodshot, gripping my shoulders tightly. "Mia, is it fun to toy with me?" And I, who had originally given up, seeing how much Ethan cared, foolishly moved myself. I couldn't help but tear up and wanted to hug him, but was pushed away by Ethan. I wanted to explain that I really had the idea of leaving him forever. But I was pregnant, my child couldn't be without a father. Ethan didn't want to listen, didn't give me a chance to explain, and slammed the door and left. Presumably now, Ethan thought I was toying with him again. "Butler, do you not want this job anymore? If you team up with Mia to deceive me again in the future, I'll deal with you too." Ethan spoke confidently, convinced that I had colluded with the butler to deceive him. Hearing Ethan say this, the butler didn't dare make a sound anymore. Vivian on the side, seeing Ethan's indifferent attitude toward me, curled her lips. After hanging up on the butler, not long after, Ethan's phone rang again. Glancing at the caller ID, it was the private detective I had hired. It seemed there was new progress in Vivian framing me for pushing her into the water. Ethan looked at the unknown caller, hesitated, but still answered. "Hello, Mr. Ethan, we have restored the original video of the falling into water incident. My client, Miss Mia, has been murdered. You are her emergency contact, so we will hand it over to you for safekeeping." The words "murdered" struck Ethan's nerves. It scared him so much he couldn't hold the phone steady, but the next second he recovered as usual, even a bit angry. "Toying with me again? Even going so far as to hire actors? Think I'll fall for it?" The person on the other end, thinking Ethan couldn't accept it for the moment, said nothing and just sent the original video of the falling into water to his phone and hung up. Floating beside Ethan, I only felt chilled. The evidence was right in his face, yet he refused to believe it. Was it guilt or fear? Fear of knowing the truth, fear of wronging me. Or fear that his kind and weak childhood sweetheart's image would collapse? Recalling that day, Vivian asked me to accompany her to the water park, then I was knocked down by someone, and Vivian fell into the water. At the time, she insisted it was me who pushed her, and Ethan believed it without question. I knew Ethan definitely wouldn't let me go. To prove my innocence, I secretly contacted a private detective immediately without telling anyone. Unfortunately, it still wasn't in time to save myself. Vivian on the side looked at Ethan's phone, her whole face paling. Seeing Ethan pick up the phone to watch the video, she clutched her chest and fell to the ground. "Ethan, my heart feels so bad." Ethan's finger, about to click the video, froze. He was so smart, how could he not know Vivian was pretending? But seeing her in distress, he finally sighed helplessly. "Vivian, don't do it again, okay? Let's go apologize to Mia, she's always been soft-hearted, she'll forgive us." Ethan put the phone in his pocket and helped Vivian up. I gnashed my teeth in anger on the side. I was already dead, who needed your apology? After saying that, Ethan was about to pull Vivian out the door. "Let's go pick a gift for Mia. She'll be happy when she sees it." Seeing Ethan like this, Vivian's eyes revealed a trace of disgust, but she smiled and nodded. But before they could leave, the butler called. "Has Madam admitted her mistake?" Hearing his own words slip out, Ethan surprisedly pursed his lips. Watching from the side, I only felt laughable about myself. How humble was I before? Always taking the initiative to make up. Ethan had become accustomed to it. Hearing Ethan say this, the butler still braced himself and replied, "Young master, you should come back. The police want you to claim Madam's body." The smile on Ethan's face froze, his eyes carrying a trace of panic, coldly scolding into the phone. "Butler, I've told you not to help Madam play this kind of joke on me again. Such poor memory, getting senile?" The butler on the other end seemed very at a loss, explaining to someone. The next second, a clear and standard voice came from the phone. "Mr. Ethan, my badge number is 089421. Your wife, Mrs. Mia, has drowned. Please return immediately to cooperate with our work." "What did you say?" Ethan staggered and almost fell. The next second, he got up, rushed into the garage in panic, and sped all the way to the airport. Vivian on the side didn't have time to get in the car and was left behind. I watched everything coldly, only feeling it absurd and laughable. If only he had sent someone to check on me by the river, I wouldn't have died. Why pretend like this now? Ethan's muttering sounded in my ear. No, Mia won't die, it's all fake, definitely deceiving me. I'm going back now to expose her. After returning to the country, Ethan hurried to the police station without delay. I came with him to my body. Ethan, who hadn't dared to delay a second along the way, suddenly stopped. No, this isn't my wife. My wife can swim, she once won first place in a swimming competition. She wouldn't. Ethan was originally full of confidence, his voice loud, but as if remembering something, he suddenly fell silent. I couldn't help but curl my lip. He had remembered. Remembered that back then, after going bankrupt and being abandoned by Vivian who went abroad, he lost the will to live and went to jump into the sea. It was me who, to save him, jumped into the sea without regard for anything. I finally caught Ethan and wanted to send him back to shore. But he was determined to die, exhausting my strength, unwilling to live. Fortunately, through my persistence, we finally waited for rescuers. I pushed Ethan toward them, but I myself was about to sink into the sea bottom. After narrowly escaping death, I developed a fear of water from then on. At that time, Ethan was moved to tears, holding my hand and saying, "Mia, from now on, my life is yours. I'll protect you for life." But this person who said he would protect me for life, knowing I feared water, unhesitatingly agreed when Vivian wanted me to accompany her to the water park. And after Vivian fell into the water, without listening to my explanation, tied me to the river surface for 3 days and 3 nights. Watching Ethan approach my body in full defeat, his hand trembling as he lifted the white cloth. When about to witness my miserable state after death, I took a deep breath and tried to adjust my mindset. But seeing the pale, swollen body soaked in water, and the entire face eaten beyond recognition by fish, with only bulging pupils, I still couldn't help but tremble. Ethan, however, breathed a sigh of relief. This isn't my wife loves beauty so much. It's impossible for her to let her face be ruined like this and not escape. Escape? How I wanted to escape, but that iron chain was welded to my feet, making it impossible for me to escape forever. Even until the last moment of death, I didn't give up struggling. To convince himself, Ethan tried hard to find evidence from my body that it wasn't me. But as his gaze shifted down, he saw the body wearing my favorite skirt. Actually, that day was still my and Ethan's wedding anniversary. I had planned to tell him I was pregnant that day. But in his eyes, there was only Vivian. He completely forgot our wedding anniversary. Even on our wedding anniversary, he personally threw me into the river. The cold river water covered me. I died in the water I loved most in life but also feared most. Even in death, I couldn't close my eyes. No way. Ethan's voice completely lost its momentum, no longer able to hide his inner panic. Just like last time, you're deceiving me, right? His voice was trembling, his eyes bloodshot. Watching Ethan like this, I only felt aggrieved. From beginning to end, I never deceived him, on the contrary, he never believed me. Suddenly, Ethan grabbed my corpse's right hand, laughing somewhat maniacally. The ring, she doesn't have the wedding ring on her hand. That's the one I personally put on Mia, she never wanted to take it off. As if to confirm his words, he raised his own wedding ring. Looking at the wedding ring symbolizing love, I felt it ironic. Ethan, wearing the wedding ring with me, spent 3 days and 3 nights with Vivian. So, he also knew he was married. I had to be glad that this wedding ring fell off during my struggle. In this life, the next life, forever and ever, I didn't want any connection with Ethan. When Ethan wanted to raise my hand to show everyone, he found he couldn't pull it. My hand was firmly protecting my belly, as if guarding some treasure. That was my child. Unfortunately, I didn't protect it. Clutching my chest, I felt intense pain. So souls could hurt too. Ethan collapsed to the ground, then crawled up. He rushed out in panic, bumping into Vivian who had just arrived. Go, get out. This isn't Mia. Vivian realized something, a flash of joy in her eyes. She supported Ethan and left. I was forced to follow them. Clearly, Ethan had killed me, yet now he was pretending to be mad. I just waited for the police to arrest this murderer so I could dispel the resentment in my heart. Back home, Ethan locked himself up, not letting anyone in. He sat blankly like that for 4 days and 4 nights, his eyes dark-circled, his gaze increasingly sinister. His eyes staring at the phone didn't relax for a moment, but my chat interface never sent a message. Finally, he gave up. Mia, this time you're more backbone than last time. 4 days, no message to me. It's okay, I won't let you leave. When I find you back, I'll punish you properly. After saying that, Ethan made a call and went out. Ethan didn't miss any trace of me, yet still got no news of me. Except for that body already verified by DNA as mine. But he refused to believe it, even not allowing anyone to mention it. Until he found a pregnancy report, Ethan completely broke down and fell ill. At this moment, he knew I was really pregnant. I hadn't deceived him. But he forced pregnant me to go to the water park I feared most and tied me to the river surface. Ethan painfully hammered his head, his eyes full of regret. Seeing this, Vivian hugged him to comfort him. But Ethan pushed her away. Mia must be angry with me, she's hiding. I have to find her back, whatever punishment she gives me is fine. After speaking, Ethan dragged his sick body out. Vivian watched Ethan's departing back, her eyes full of disappointment. After searching for a week with no results, Ethan's illness became more serious. After the butler gave the repaired listening device to Ethan, he respectfully left. Seeing the listening device, Ethan's state improved a lot. He quickly connected it to the TV. Mia, let me see where you went after escaping. I won't let you leave. But the next scene on the TV made Ethan widen his pupils, even forgetting to breathe. On the screen, my face was ashen from choking, begging him for help. At that time, he was kissing Vivian and mocking me for playing the victim. Later, my mouth was filled with water, unable to speak. But he said I could still drink water and wouldn't die. Even before death, his last words were asking me, "Do you admit your mistake?" At this moment, facing the impact of these scenes, Ethan could no longer hold it together. He couldn't bear to watch anymore, but every minute and second was my experience. Even now, I had already closed my eyes, but the sounds from the TV still pulled me back to that torture, making even my soul tremble uncontrollably. Ethan suddenly lifted his head and saw on the screen an iron chain tightly locking my legs. He completely lost control, roaring, "Butler, get over here." Who? Who chained Madam's legs? I was stunned. It wasn't Ethan who ordered the iron chain to bind me? Who would want to kill me? Vivian. These 2 words flashed in my mind. Looking at Ethan's appearance as if he wanted to tear the harmdoer to pieces, I had some doubts. Would Ethan really avenge me? I stared intently at Ethan's face. The butler, hearing the noise, didn't dare delay a moment and hurried over. "Young master, it was Miss Vivian's order. At the time, I ran to ask you, but you didn't let me speak and ordered no one to mention Madam." After hearing the butler's explanation, Ethan's originally full rage suddenly went silent. Looking at his reaction, I had already anticipated it, but couldn't help feeling heartbroken. Husband and wife for many years, yet couldn't compare to a childhood sweetheart just back from abroad. Was my life not a life? Butler, you'd better not deceive me. No matter who harmed Mia, I'll make her pay with her life. Ethan's voice suddenly aged a lot, but was unusually firm. He picked up his phone, called Vivian, and hurried over. I floated in the air, following him. To be honest, I still didn't believe Ethan would avenge me. Arriving at the villa Ethan bought for Vivian, seeing Vivian waiting in the yard for him. Ethan's face was somewhat strange. Vivian stepped forward, intimately linking arms with Ethan, but was dodged. Ethan walked straight into the house, where photos of him and Vivian as children hung on the wall. Ethan, do you remember? When we were kids, you saw others taking wedding photos and insisted I accompany you to take some. You even said I was your bride. Vivian smiled innocently. Whenever Ethan saw this smile, he would be entranced. At this moment, he didn't speak, his eyes even showing a trace of pain. Vivian also noticed Ethan's abnormality. She rolled her eyes and then cried out. Ethan, back then I didn't leave you on purpose, you know, I've been in poor health since childhood. I didn't want to burden you, so I left. No one with a brain would believe these words. But looking at Ethan's expression, it was obvious he believed them. About Sister Mia, I didn't expect it to turn out like this. The person is gone. Ethan, let's look forward, okay? Vivian still didn't know that Ethan already knew she had privately ordered the iron chain to bind my legs. She continued to pretend innocence. Ethan looked up, his face full of disbelief. Vivian, how did you become like this? In Ethan's heart, Vivian was an untouchable white moonlight that no one could compare to. At this moment, that filter shattered. He painfully clutched his chest, as if even breathing was difficult. Look, he was much more upset than when he learned of my death. Was it you? Even at this point, Ethan still spoke with a trace of hope. But Vivian acted to the end, with an expression as if she didn't know what Ethan was saying. At this moment, Ethan hesitated. Watching from the side, I was furious. Was he an idiot? Why not bring the butler for confrontation? He believed whatever Vivian said. Although Ethan's face was still ugly, he breathed a sigh of relief and probed, what you said to the butler. He recorded it. Vivian's originally innocent face instantly twisted, changing from weak to shrieking. It was me, I hate her. Ethan, is it wrong for me to like you? Ethan's eyes widened incredulously, his whole body shaking. He almost believed Vivian's words. He didn't believe Vivian would harm me, didn't believe his beautiful white moonlight was so vicious. Vivian also realized there was no recording, Ethan was testing her. Her face full of regret, she could only cry and beg. Ethan, it's all because I like you, momentarily obsessed. Ethan, are you really going to send me to the police station? You know, I've been in poor health since childhood. I'll die, Ethan. Ethan's eyes were full of pain, he was stunned for a long time, letting Vivian cry and shout. I waited on the side. Ethan had said he would make the murderer pay with life. I hoped this time, he would do as he said. After a long time, Ethan finally spoke. Turn yourself in, Vivian. I'll help you get a reduced sentence. Hearing him say this, the last trace of expectation in my heart vanished. Huge unwillingness and grievance overwhelmed me, anger making my entire soul go mad. Suddenly, wind blew in the villa. Photos of Ethan and Vivian fell to the ground and shattered. The red wine on the table happened to spill on them, like blood. Mia, is it you? Mia. Unlike Vivian's fear, Ethan shouted excitedly. Looking at his hypocritical affection, it was nauseating. I pinched Ethan's neck, roaring, why? Vivian killed me, why not make her pay with her life? And you, Ethan, you accomplice, should go to hell too. But I was just a soul, unable to choke the man in front of me to death. Only a gust of wild wind proclaimed my unwillingness. The door creaked from the wind, curtains flapping against the windows. Ethan madly searched the house for me. Suddenly, a document fell on his face. Non-disclosure agreement? Vivian saw it and tried to snatch it back from Ethan's hand, but it was too late. It clearly detailed the falling into water incident. Vivian bribed the person who knocked me down to create the illusion that I deliberately pushed her into the water. For this, she gave $500,000 as hush money and signed this non-disclosure agreement. Ethan's face grew increasingly ugly, veins bulging on his hands. Flipping to the last page of the agreement, there was a copy of my pregnancy report clipped in. The fetal status shown was poked with several holes. Even written in red marker. Bitch, bastard, all go die. All of this was planned by Vivian, she wanted me and the child to die together. After learning the truth, Ethan's whole body was shaking. His eyes bloodshot, face ashen, he walked over. His hand choked Vivian's neck, no tenderness in his eyes, unable to help cursing. Good, really ruthless. You vicious woman. Vivian struggled hard. Ethan, how are you any better? It was you who actively tied her to the river surface, she begged you to save her, and you didn't. Ethan, you're the real murderer. After hearing Vivian's words, Ethan's chest heaved violently, his face full of pain. But wasn't the fact just as Vivian said? Back then, I begged Ethan to listen to my explanation, but he thought I was quibbling. When I was about to drown, I begged Ethan to save me, but he said I was playing the victim. Clearly married to me, yet ambiguous with Vivian. Weren't all these done by him, Ethan? And I, for such a scumbag, not only risked my life to save him when he jumped into the sea. Also, upon learning he liked children but I had difficulty getting pregnant, I secretly took a lot of medicine to condition my body, and only then had this child. I, who always feared bitterness, vomited while swallowing the medicine each time. But the child I worked so hard for died just like that. Looking at this pair of murderers in front of me, I wished they would go to the 18th level of hell. Vivian's face turned red from Ethan's choking, still calling him a murderer over and over. Murderer, these 3 words constantly stimulated Ethan. Finally, in anger, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Vivian took the opportunity to escape, and after catching her breath, snatched the non-disclosure agreement from Ethan's hand and tore it to shreds. I really didn't expect to have the fortune to see Ethan act against his white moonlight. He did this not just for me, but more for himself. Furious for being schemed against. Resentful for his trust being trampled. Moreover, what Vivian said was all true, my death was inseparable from Ethan. If only he had shown a bit of compassion once, I wouldn't have died. You're talking nonsense, it's you who killed Mia, I'll make you pay blood for blood. Ethan didn't even have the courage to admit he killed me, he stepped forward, grabbed Vivian's hand, and wanted to take her to the police station. At this moment, the door to Vivian's house was opened. The Shin family's illegitimate son entered with the listening device, bringing police. The murderer who killed Mia is my brother, Ethan. What I have is physical evidence, Miss Vivian is the witness. Hearing someone come in, Vivian quickly shouted loudly. Help, murder. Upon hearing this, a large group surrounded Ethan. Then they took them all to the police station. Seeing this scene, I quickly followed. Ethan had always been fighting with the Shin family's illegitimate son Victor, presumably this time, Victor would definitely drag Ethan down. But Ethan was after all the most valued heir of the Shin family, this matter was suppressed after a few days. When Ethan was released without charge, I gnashed my teeth in anger. But unexpectedly, Vivian gave Ethan a surprise that day. She posted the video of Ethan tying me to the river surface, leading to my death, online, causing a huge uproar. Ethan was labeled a wife killer, netizens rallied for me, demanding justice. Under the Shin Group's official website were messages requesting to arrest Ethan and pay life for life. When Ethan saw these messages, his expression changed from disbelief to hatred. Overnight, he had people capture the escaped Vivian back. From the moment Vivian entered, I noticed the camera hidden under her clothes. To help cover for her, I used all my strength to whip up a strong wind to distract Ethan. Mia, is it you? You're back. Vivian is here, are you unhappy? Don't worry, I won't let her off easy. Ethan looked at the curtains blown wildly by the wind, muttering to himself. He looked just like a madman. Seeing this scene, Vivian was somewhat afraid, her voice became even weaker. Ethan, please let me go. I won't say anything online anymore, I'll help you cover it up. Please let me go. The originally mad Ethan, hearing Vivian speak, his whole face darkened. He grabbed Vivian's hair and dragged her to the poolside. Vivian, you bitch. You dare post the video online? This is simply an insult to me. The suffering Mia endured, I want you to taste it all. Vivian's head was pressed into the water, she thrashed and begged, all ignored by Ethan. Ethan's eyes were bloodshot, his face like llama, accompanied by the strong wind I whipped up, as a soul, I couldn't help but tremble. I dared not imagine the expressions of netizens watching the live stream through the camera. Perhaps the wind was too strong, my pregnancy report was blown over. The embryonic form of the baby on it stimulated Ethan to act even more ruthlessly. You know fear now? How afraid my Mia must have been then. She was pregnant with my child. After saying that, Ethan pulled the nearly suffocating Vivian out of the water, and after she recovered, quickly pressed her back in. I dared not watch this scene, it would make me recall being drowned alive again. At that time, my limbs and bones were icy cold and piercing, intense chest pain and despair overwhelming my body. And I, who clearly could swim, was locked by the iron chain, only able to wait for death alive. When pulling Vivian up again, she weakly spoke. Ethan, what affection are you pretending? If you love Mia, why be ambiguous with me? If you love her, why personally throw her into the water? Ethan couldn't hear these truths. He would never admit he killed me, only cowardly pushing all responsibility onto Vivian. I again blew intimate photos of Ethan and Vivian in front of him. When I was taking medicine to gain weight to give him a child, Ethan accompanied Vivian to the amusement park. In the photos, they looked like a perfect couple. When I had a fever and was sick, Ethan ran several kilometers to buy Vivian's favorite ice cream. They took sweet photos, while I almost burned to death at home. These photos were all evidence of Ethan's cheating. Once, when I saw these photos, I secretly wiped tears, falling into endless self-doubt. Now I only feel such a scumbag isn't worth it. Seeing these photos, Ethan was devastated, he threw the photos into the pool, maniacally muttering. Kill you, Vivian, disappear with the photos. At this time, police sirens suddenly sounded around. A group of police broke in, I breathed a sigh of relief. Ethan's crime scene was live-streamed throughout, this time, he could no longer escape legal punishment. In prison, Ethan sat listlessly, losing his former demeanor. Vivian had recovered and came with Victor to see Ethan. I followed them, my resentment dissipating a lot. Seeing the two come together, Ethan suddenly laughed. Vivian, so you wanted to scheme with Victor against me? To snatch the entire Shin family from my hands? Vivian didn't deny it, looking at Ethan with deep hatred. On the contrary, Victor was very pleased. Brother, blame yourself for not resisting temptation. Someone who mistreats his wife deserves to have nothing. What Victor said was also my sentiment. All this was Ethan's own fault. Seeing them about to leave, Ethan couldn't help asking Vivian, why? Vivian looked coldly at Ethan, pointing at him full of disgust. Why? Of course for myself. Be your lover? You couldn't let go of Mia, a man like you who eats from the bowl while looking at the pot, of course can't compare to money. Victor gave me 50 million, you can't give me anything. Ethan, didn't we say when we were kids you'd protect me for life? Just sit in this prison peacefully for me. Seeing Vivian and Victor's departing backs, Ethan could no longer hold on. I saw his face pale, lips colorless, presumably, his days were numbered. Originally thought Ethan would die soon, but unexpectedly, Vivian's death news came first. Since that day Vivian was pressed into the pool by Ethan, a large amount of water entered her lungs, causing infection. When Ethan heard this news, he couldn't help laughing in prison. Laughing and laughing, blood spurted from his mouth, and he lay on the ground dying. And my resentment dissipated, my soul became incredibly light, flying out of this place that had trapped me. Striving to run toward the light ahead, but I heard a familiar voice from behind. Mia. So Ethan had died too, but what did that have to do with me? I stepped forward and ran ahead. In the next life, forever and ever, never look back.